After years of austerity, when social dimension has been ignored in the European Union, it seems we are finally entering a new phase. Next week in Gothenburg, the European Pillar of Social Rights is going to be proclaimed, and this should be the beginning of this new phase. But what exactly is the social pillar, or the European Pillar of Social Rights? It's still a concept quite abstract for most of the citizens. And what is this proclamation about? How is this going to change the life of citizens? Well, these are some of the questions that we are going to try to answer with our guests today. So let me please first introduce them. I have here Maria João Rodrigues. She is Vice President of the Socialist Group in the European Parliament and President of FEPS, the think tank, Socialist think tank. And she was rapporteur of the social pillar here in the Parliament.
Hello.
Thanks. I have also here Conny Reuter. He is Secretary General of Solidar, European network of NGOs working for social justice, and also representative of the social platform, the organization which will be in Gothenburg next week. Welcome. And we have here also Luca Visentini. He is Secretary General of ETUC, is the European Trade Union Confederation.
Hi.
Thanks also for being here. And last but not least, Anna Widegren, Secretary General of the European Youth Forum. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with the first basic question. What is the social pillar? Let's try to explain it in a very simple way. Maria, I can start with you, for example.
Well, the European house is unbalanced. We need to recognize this. There is a financial pillar, there is an economic pillar, there is a political pillar, but there is no social pillar. So, and the consequence of this is that citizens don't see the effect of having a European Union to make the best of their lives, working lives and living conditions in general. Mm-hmm. So we need a social pillar to rebalance the European house. But this means to have updated social standards, coping with the new situation in front of us. Not only global competition, but also the digital revolution and the aging trends. Our societies are changing and our citizens have new needs, particularly young people. Mm-hmm. So we need to make sure that our European social model will be fitting the future we have in front of us.
But the social pillar, is, so people to understand, is like a set of principles, we could say, or what is exactly like?
The pillar is objectives, principles, but a lot of concrete measures to change the situation in the ground. This means legislation, this means financial instruments, this means most of all to change the direction of social policies and of economic policies. Without that, we cannot cope with the kind of social inequalities we have among member states and within member states.
Mm-hmm. And the proclamation itself, I was referring to, that is going to take place next week in Gothenburg. What is this? Is like a big ceremony? What is going to happen there?
The proclamation is just the start. It is important because it's committing the European institutions at the highest level. This only happened once in the past with the Charter of Fundamental Rights for European citizens. Now we have a proclamation for the social pillar, committing President of the European Parliament, European Commission and European Council. Social partners are also a key actor in this. Mm-hmm. But I repeat, this is just a start. We need to make this work for real.
Mm-hmm. So the same question for you, because you are all going to be in Gothenburg next week. So what is the importance of the social pillar and the proclamation taking place next week?
Well, first of all, we come out from, let's say, 10 years of middle-age austerity in Europe. And this has completely dismantled our famous and very well established at that time European social model that was made out by rights, first of all, but also industrial relations and social protection systems. These were the three elements that made the European social model strong and as a benchmark, a positive benchmark for all the other continents that were looking at Europe as the best experience in the world in terms of social cohesion, social protection and social rights. All this was dismantled. So now the problem we have in Europe is to rebuild it up in a new spirit, of course, with some innovation spirit as well. And the social pillar is the first step to make this possible. 20 principles. These principles are already more or less listed in other legal tools of the European Union, in the treaties, in the social charter, in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, etc. But the problem is that these principles are not implemented properly on the ground. And so the pillar should be this, the ground, the basis to make sure that these 20 principles, under the responsibility of member states, the European Union, the European Commission, the social partners, the other stakeholders in the society, can be then implemented on the ground via legislation, via concrete measures, actions, policy, etc. This is the point. And then, of course, what is written in the paper is not enough. Then the proclamation is exactly this. It's the commitment coming from the 28 member states plus the European Union institutions to make sure that the 20 principles can live in the reality, can be implemented through concrete tools on the ground. And this will be the next step. After the proclamation, we have to work on that exactly.
So as Maria was mentioning, this commitment at the highest level, which is also important, even if we need to move forward.
Without the commitment and engagement of the member states, of the institutions, it will be impossible to make these principles living in the reality.
Anna, you can...
No, I think the pillar is so important. It kind of lays out the set of principles of our social rights, and especially for young people, I think it's so important. It kind of really delineates that everyone has the right to quality and inclusive education, everyone should have the right to a minimum wage that is ensured, which is actually not the case today. I mean, all these rights exist, but they're actually not ensured. A lot of people, especially young people, don't have access to them. If you look at young people, they are the group that is at highest risk of poverty in Europe today. And this really shows, I mean, when it comes to things like this proclamation should give young people the hope that Europe actually cares and is looking at their social rights and protecting their social rights, because as Luca was mentioning before, this through the austerity measures, through a lot of things such as investment in education being cut, investment in a lot of social rights being cut in the last few years, rights are not protected, rights have been violated, and especially young people have been the group mostly affected by this. So therefore, by setting these kind of principles in the pillar and then having this proclamation, we then ensure and guarantee these rights, and then exactly the implementation and follow-up to this is absolutely essential.
Conny, the same question for you, and also I would like to introduce the idea. How can this, and if we can give some examples, I will ask the same question to all, how can this be an opportunity to change, especially the conditions of workers? Because the social pillar is really broad, but for example, let's focus on workers' conditions.
Yeah, well, let me start first of all, for us, the importance of the pillar of social rights. It's a long time ago that we had the social agenda at European level. We had the Lisbon strategy, we had social objectives in Europe 2020, and always we had the impression it was a little bit put beside. And then we went through the aftermath of the crisis. We had always the same mantra. The mantra was fiscal and financial consolidation. And together with our partners in the parliament, from the progressive side, together with the youth forum, with the trade unions, we always said we have to take into consideration the social consolidation. How do we get there? Because the precariousness of work is increasing. Unemployment has not been significantly reduced. And we have many, on the labor market, situations where people are just afraid of their future, also because of the digital revolution and all the impact it has. So it's now an opportunity to say, if the pillar of social rights is more than only a nice set of rights with nice principles, which you can use from time to time if you want it, there's really a commitment from the European institutions, from the social partners, from our side as civil society, and in particular from the member states, that could be a contribution to some kind of really social consolidation at European level. Because if you look, the negative and drastic effects of the non-social consolidation, they are translated by voters' behavior. Extremism, populism, absenteeism and so on, and there is no country anymore in Europe where right extreme and others would not come up. So we have to get ownership again on this question. It is not only on growth, it is not a fairness on growth, it has to be really a growth policy that is sustainable, and it needs to be accompanied by social measures and by a social agenda. What is positive in the pillar, and I think if you look to the 20 principles, it does not start with employment. It starts with education and gender equality. So I think the positive side is also that it needs to focus on the labor market for sure. It needs to focus on fair working conditions. It needs to be a contribution to reduce the precariousness at the labor market, and giving the feeling more than giving the feeling that Europe is doing something for the people, for the workers, for the employees, and also that people see there is the possibility that the social comes back on the agenda. I found the other day, a document from 1973, a speech from Willy Brandt. Yeah, and what was the topic? Social Europe, 1973. So it's a long time. So hopefully that with the pillar and with an engagement through the proclamation, we will get to something which can be a reference framework for the member states and for the European institutions.
Is this the last chance for Europe to reconnect with citizens? As many are claiming these days.
I'm always afraid to say the last chance, because if this is not working, then you say the game is over. No, it should not be over, but it is certainly one of the last big windows of opportunity.
I refer the same question to you as representative of the European Confederation of Trade Unions. So how can this improve the conditions of workers?
Well, it depends a lot on the concrete tools that will be put in place immediately after the proclamation in Gothenburg. And by the way, it's not a blank page, in the sense that there are already a series of initiatives going on, and it's worth mentioning this initiative. The first one is already quite advanced, that is the revision of the Posting of Workers Directive. This was, a long-standing, infinite discussion, lasting for decades, now, and finally we are there. We can make it. We can make it in the sense of introducing full equal treatment for mobile workers in the European single market. This is something that we have tried to achieve for years and years, and now probably we can be there. Then there are new initiatives that are going on. One was already mentioned, the topic by Conny, is about gender equality, work-life balance, and a different balance in the labor market, and different opportunities and more equal opportunities for women and men when they approach the labor market, and they have to reconcile their life with their work. And this initiative about work-life balance and parental leave. This is a proposal for a directive already on the table, already planned in the Parliament for discussion. So it's something on which we can really have some concrete results before the end of the term of the current institutions at the European level, before the European elections. And then we have other three tools, very important. The first one is about, it's very technical, it's a directive already existing from early 90s that is about the written statement that is delivered to each and every worker where the worker starts. Exactly, let's say the written contract, let's say. The point now is to transform this from a simple information, for a simple piece of information, into a list of minimum rights that each and every worker should enjoy when he or she starts a new job. And this is really fundamental. It's something like the framework directive for social rights and workers' rights that Maria João tried to push in the Parliament in a report about the social pillar. Then we have another one that is coming, that is about universal access to social protection systems for each and every worker in Europe. And also this is it's extraordinary importance, because it means that finally we can really give to each worker the possibility to have a proper social protection during the working life. And last but not least, this is also a bit technical but very important, is the idea of the European Commission to create a sort of labor authority. We have the banking authority, we have a lot of authorities, in economic and financial fields, but nothing for work, nothing for labor, nothing controlling, that abuses can be stopped, that there are no more infringements to the European and national labor law, and also that the inspectorate systems and the labor markets can be properly coordinated. Well, if we can get all this, 5 pieces of legislation by the European elections, I think we have already a very significant batch, of concrete measures to show to workers and citizens that their life can be improved.
Maria, you were directly involved in the negotiations of these measures that Luca was mentioning now. So in your view, what should be the next steps right after the proclamation, and how difficult it can get? Because negotiations were not easy at all, as I understood.
Well, let me tell you that the Parliament has adopted a report which is very ambitious, because it's turning the principles which will be proclaimed now into real measures with updated standards for all kinds of people in Europe. Children, young people, men and women when they reconcile working life with family life, but also senior citizens and all those in risk of exclusion. So the Parliament report is extremely detailed on the way to reach there. And I think that immediately after we proclaim, next week, the social pillar, we need to make sure that these will be translated into the concrete measures. And I agree with Luca, from my viewpoint, we need to make sure that everybody in employment in Europe needs to count on 2 basic things. One is a clear and decent labor contract for everybody, whatever the kind of job, even for those who work for online platforms, and there are more and more, particularly young people. And then another key objective is make sure that everybody has access to social protection. And this is not the reality now. We have more and more people, those who were already in the precarious jobs, and now the new ones working for the digital economy, who have nothing of this, neither a contract nor social protection. We cannot accept this going on, because this will undermine welfare system for everybody.
And
so we need to stop this.
And these measures, specific measures you're talking about, so a decent labor contract and access to social protection, is this something that we have the chance to move forward in the upcoming weeks, months?
Yes, I need to tell you that in front of us in plenary session of the European Parliament, the European Commissioner, Marianne Thyssen, has confirmed that the Commission will table legislation if social partners in their negotiation, which is taking place now, are not able to reach a pre-agreement on this law about the written labor contract.
So if I may say, now we have some opportunities in the upcoming weeks, months, to make the leaders who are going to sign the proclamation accountable, because of course now everyone wants to be in the picture, because it's a nice thing, you know, it's a social summit and so on, but now we need actions. So I guess it will be the time, social partners also in the Parliament, to make them accountable.
Yes, but you can be sure that we here in the Parliament, we will make all these actors accountable. All those coming to the proclamation, signing up the proclamation, we need to take this for serious. So they will be made accountable for sure.
And it's important to underline the incredible alliance we built up with the Parliament. I mean, in the preparation going to the summit in Gothenburg, I mean, and now it will be even more important in the implementation phase, because we really need together to watch at them and to make sure that when the European Commission will present these legal tools, I mean, okay, the Parliament, of course, will discuss, will vote, etc. But then the problem is that the Council should not stop this process. And the risk that some member states will try to put obstacles, I mean, and to block the concrete measures for implementation will be incredibly high. And by the way, the two elements that are probably the most important ones in these legal tools are, first, that self-employed people and non-standard workers, the ones that are completely excluded from social rights at the moment, are included. They come into the picture of the social pillar. And second, that we can use these two tools that we were mentioning, written statement and social protection, to make sure that we can give to people what Anna was referring to, a decent salary. Because you can have the most fantastic rights in the world, but if your salary doesn't allow you to have a decent life, everything is nothing. So this is really crucial, I mean.
And Anna, she was mentioning decent labor contracts, access to social protection. As we know, young people are normally the most affected by these. So how do you see these? I
mean, there is a need for forward thinking, and we need to revive through the pillar and through the proclamation the European social model. I mean, this is crucial, and it's Maria João was right in saying we have to be ambitious in this, and we need to really put in concrete measures. I mean, some of them have already been mentioned, from the directive on access to social protection of all workers, a pushing for the framework on the directive for minimum wage. Again, it's absolutely essential. The non-standard contract, the precarious contract, yes, young people are the most affected by this, but it's also how the social model is constructed. For a lot of young people, they cannot even access social rights in their first years of work, because and therefore they're already excluded from the start. But then combine that with high unemployment rates of young people, then they're already excluded, and that's why they fall into poverty. So rethinking and actually pushing on these concrete measures is absolutely essential, and now is the moment, and we cannot delay to do that. We also, again, the endorsement of the pillar should accelerate the negotiation of the work-life balance package. This was already mentioned several times. But we cannot, if you look at young people with gender, there's a big difference. For example, 11% of young fathers are inactive, but it's 35% if you look at young mothers. And therefore, Europe has to stand up now in order to really protect and really see to help young people and citizens as a whole to reconcile professional and family life. This pillar and the principles are very much geared towards workers, but it goes beyond that. It's towards European citizens as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And Anna, Luca was just referring to social partners, the role they have been playing and the role they have to play. So what has been this role and what should be this role?
I mean, it's incredibly important that social partners and civil society organizations could continue to push and continue to be part of the implementation, continue being part of making sure that holding the institution accountable, holding heads of state accountable, and continuing pushing this in order to make sure that the concrete measures become a reality.
Yeah. Conny, I refer to you the same question about the social partners because I think it's a fundamental point in all these.
Well, we are not social partners because these are the classical social partners, and we are not acting on the social dialogue but on the civil dialogue, but we are a social actor. And I think what is often confounded is social NGOs are not lobbyists that knock on the doors of the MEPs. We contribute to the development of policies and to alliances because what is the reality? The reality is that the constituencies of our organizations, being youth organizations, social NGOs or others, they work on the ground. So they see the drastic effects of unemployment, of precariousness. They see also the difficulties of integration policies and all this. And therefore, based on the experience of social NGOs and civil society, we can contribute and make and develop also another vision. Because with the pillar of social rights, well, sometimes I'm thinking on a famous French writer whose name was Anatole France. Yeah? And Anatole France, this was during my studies, he had a fantastic quote. He said at that time, for the rights, everybody has the same rights. Everybody can sleep under the bridges of Paris. So, and I think this is exactly the point which we have to avoid. That means a nice set of principles, a nice set of rights needs to be concrete, and I will not repeat what the others have said. But what we need also is to invert a curve, which is these austerity policies also when it comes to the necessary investments. Social protection is important for sure, and we need protection where we need decent work and decent salaries. But we need also money for investment in education, in qualification. Labor markets are changing, and often employers are just saying, I have no qualified workers. Yeah, but please then put something on the table to qualify them, and they will follow you, because workers that are correctly paid, that are qualified, and they identify with the work, they are also much more productive. It's a reality, and this is not old school from former times. This is a reality we need to remind. And secondly, I think we need to overcome also this disruption within the European Union. There are sometimes you have the rich Nordic countries who say, yeah, we are afraid of losing. And you have the South, which is more in difficulties, and they say we cannot reach what the others want. Therefore, if really, and I hope that all the heads of states will be in Gothenburg, and for those who will not come, we will make them accountable. The trade unions, civil society, and the progressive political parties, those who are not, we will not be in Gothenburg. They send a clear sign they are not interested by social progress. And this is disastrous, and this cannot go through. Therefore, we need really to push. We need the pillar, we need implementation program, and we need really to invert the curve, getting a little bit more conversions upwards for all, and getting an access to equal rights and equal treatments, and something very old also, equal opportunities. Equal opportunities is at the core of our societies. And I just come back from South Africa. What do South Africans think? They do not make the difference between Sweden, Germany, Italy or Spain. For them it's Europe. And what is the reference? It's the welfare state. It's our social model. And we are about to give this up. We are about to say it's not so important like just economic development and free financial markets. No. Therefore, it is an important point. And I think if we really together, we can push for this and get something which we also can show afterwards that Europe is doing something, that would be really make the difference with the past, let's say, 10 years, where we had a lot of discourse on economic growth and financial consolidation, but where we forgot the most important side, the citizens, the workers, and social inclusion and, well, the social model, in fact.
Maria, very quickly, because we are running out of time, but I know that the role of social partners is important. It was important in doing the negotiations. What can you say about this?
Well, they were crucial because we could see all over these negotiations, when we were preparing the report in the Parliament, dealing with all the political groups, when we were opening the consultation to the overall society in Europe, social partners were the key actor, but also many other stakeholders coming from the civil society, because Conny is right. The social pillar is about citizens and those living in Europe and not just about workers. Let me be clear, because the social pillar involves measures for children, young people in education, young people when they are entering into the labor market, men and women when they reconcile their working life with family life, senior people already in retirement age and in need of long-term care, for instance, immigrants arriving to Europe, and people overall in risk of social exclusion. So the social pillar has very concrete measures for all these kind of target groups. And that's why we need to have a very broad coalition to push in the right direction.
And last question, also quickly, I know it's a difficult one, but money, because it's always like a key point.
Exactly.
Where, because all this sounds really nice, but where is the money going to come from?
And you're thinking of ABBA in Sweden, eh? Money, money.
Of course, this is a key question, and we want a credible social pillar. So a credible social pillar means to have legislation and good social dialogue to update standards, but then this needs to be turned in real possibilities to invest in people, starting with education and training, and then making sure that everybody can have access to fair wages. For me, a first step is a fair tax policy. We need to tackle everything which has tax evasion, tax avoidance, starting with the big multinational companies operating in the European single market and which don't pay taxes. So this is the first thing. We need to relaunch our welfare system with a much fairer tax policy. The second thing is to make sure that our national budgets can have some room of maneuver to invest in people, in education, in good social services, health, and child care, elderly care, and so on. And then we need to also make sure that whenever national budgets cannot comply with these kind of needs at a decent level, they should be complemented by European financial support, starting with structural funds, deglobalization fund, which should be stronger, but also the upcoming Eurozone budget, because the Eurozone has also many differences. And we need to cope with these, as in other monetary zone in the world, with a proper Eurozone budget.
So it's not only about principles, but there are also concrete measures, financial instruments proposed.
Can I tell you something about
Yes, of
this?
course.
Maria knows better than me. During the negotiations about the preamble of the text that will be proclaimed in Gothenburg, one of the major points for conflict with a series of countries that didn't want to co-sign, if some elements were not changed, was exactly that they didn't want to take any commitment about money. They didn't want the social pillar to lead to any additional investment and expenditure in social fields. And this was one of the major elements for conflict that blocked the negotiations for weeks and weeks. And at the end, Maria was one of the major actors, in trying to push for the right solution.
With all of you.
Yeah, but now the problem is to make sure that what is written in there is not simply some ink on the paper. Because now we have the negotiations going on for the new European budget, for the new multi-annual financial framework. We lost the battle last time, 7 years ago, to have at least 25% of the budget dedicated to social issues through the European Social Fund. Now we will have to really push for another fight to make sure that in the new budget, in the new MFF, there is a significant part of money available for implementing the social pillar. This will be the next fight, next battle. And we have to be there, with all our strength to make sure that we can get these results.
Yeah, and if I just can add to that, and especially to what Conny was saying, that we, the European Youth Forum, together with civil society organizations, will get organized and work with all the partners in the European Parliament to follow the implementation and make sure that exactly the pillar doesn't just become an empty shell. It needs to result in actual action, in concrete measures, and also so that European citizens don't lose trust once again in Europe, because that is the risk. If we don't manage to implement this, if we don't succeed, then once again, if it becomes an empty shell, citizens will lose trust, and that cannot happen. This cannot happen again, and we need to ensure. So therefore, there's definitely a strong commitment from civil society organization to ensure that happens.
Conny, would you like to add something before we conclude?
Very short, I would say, well, we have now for the last days the recent information of the new latest leaked Panama Papers. And what does it tell us? It is not that money is not available. Money is available, and we need fair taxation, but we need also concrete laws, and we need to end this competition between European member states, where some countries have a benefit on attracting big companies from the US who do not pay taxes. The money is there, it is available, and the fairness in Europe means also that we need more legislative acts of controlling of financial markets, and because through this we can finance. And secondly, with the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, that means the financial perspective of the European Union, Luca said it, there will be a battle on the orientations. We know there's always my understanding, too big part for agriculture, but this is another issue. And now there are new requests coming. The request is investment in security policies, in research, on defense measures and others. And we can only say the best defense also for Europe and the best defense for security. This is social investment, and to stop the idea that's only a cost factor. It's an investment, it keeps society together, and if you have a society that is kept together, it's not an old dream, it's a reality. You know exactly that the risk to get into more unsecure developments, that is really very clear. This is a conditionality from both sides. Therefore, this is the first step. If there's a clear commitment, accountability will also mean you have voted for it, you have signed it, and now concretely, the social must be at the heart and of the core of the further development of the European Union.
So I'm sure we will have more opportunities to keep going with this discussion, because as you were saying, there were many resistance by member states and by certain leaders that they will be all signing the proclamation of the European Pillar of Social Rights next week in Gothenburg. So now this is just the beginning, and then they need to move forward to action. So we will be monitoring them, and we will continue this debate. Thanks all for being here.
Thank you very much.
And good luck in Gothenburg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.